WLFE Digital Broadcast Network is on TV. You can watch all of our shows on WLFE-DB.com. Check out our channels. Paranormal View for all of your paranormal type shows. LGBTQ Friends for all of our LGBTQ shows. Variety Unlimited for all other shows. It runs 24/7 right on WLFE-DB.com. You'll even catch the lives, all in one place. Never miss an episode, past or future. WLFE-DB.com, where our shows are your shows. Search for your favorite shows like Where's My Sage, Inside the Drag Closet, Across the Pond, Everything Yet Nothing, Paratalk Radio, Step into the Paranormal, The Creepy Parlor, Just Cindy, and more. Now you won't miss an episode. Remember, follow Facebook Live and YouTube Live. Make sure you subscribe and follow your favorite WLFE-DB radio shows. You can find our shows where you listen to your favorite podcasts, like Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, and more. WLFE-DB Radio is looking for podcasts to join our family. You don't have to fit any strict genre. We're a plethora of shows. If you're looking to jump on a growing network, then contact us at WLFEDBradio@gmail.com.
Wow, Amazon Music just got a whole lot better. Your favorite shows from WLFE-DB Radio can now be found there. Yes, we are on Amazon Music, found under podcasts. Download the app, find podcasts, and search all of your favorite shows. Shows like Where's My Sage, Across the Pond, Everything Yet Nothing, Skeptical Help Bar, The Creepy Parlor, Just Cindy, and much more. Now you don't have to miss an episode ever. Amazon Music is WLFE-DB Radiofied.
Tune in to Kaleidoscope Eyes with your host, Transman Lacrosse Ortiz. Every week, we will be touching topics within the LGBTQIA+ community. We will also be having interviews with individuals within the community and allies. Journey with us as we share in their struggles and triumphs every Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern.
Welcome to Rainbow Soul, part of the WLFE-DB network, an explorative discussion about spirituality beyond mainstream religions. Hollis Taylor, author, psychic, astrologer, and alchemical mage, brings their non-binary perspective together with fellow drag king and trans man Lacrosse Ortiz, a Jewish Taino with spiritual background of exploration that has led him to an atheist perspective. Join these guys as they explore deep and difficult topics, all related to spirituality, offering a queer perspective and exploration of interesting topics and engaging guests to help explore conversations for the Rainbow Soul.
Hey!
Hello, everybody. Hi, Hollis.
Welcome, everyone, to the show. Thanks for watching Rainbow Soul. We're glad you're here. Lots of people are in the chat already. Yeah. Excited to be part. Sandy, hi. We love you, Sandy. And Chanel, we're so glad you're here. And, of course, Joseph.
Jojo.
He says, Jojo. Oh, I should be here. Hi, Tracy. We're so glad you're here. And today we're just rocking it out, and I'm totally happy to be here. I'm Hollis Taylor. I'm an author, a psychic, astrologer, tarot reader, and a general magical freak. I'm the author of Divine Androgyny. It's a sacred path for gender variant people. It's all about It's all about making your own path for spirituality that's completely authentic and completely yours. That's what it's all about. Tearing down what it means to be binary. And I'm here with my buddy Lacrosse. Tell us who you are, Lacrosse.
Hello, I'm Lacrosse Ortiz. I am a Jewish Taino atheist, always on the journey, steady on the journey, believing that you don't need a divine God to be spiritual, and just basically sharing wisdom, love wisdom, and being that my path of spirituality, along with a couple other things that I like to do, and learning. So, yep, that's me. So thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, I'm so glad you're here. What a fun topic today's topic is going to be. Joseph is asking, you guys need, I don't know these people.
Safi
Joseph
Thomas
and Tantra
Zawadi.
We would love to talk to them. Send me their like profile or whatever, or even send it to Lacrosse, either one of us, and we'll get in touch with them. Do I stand the whole time? Yes, Chanel, I do. You know why I stand? Because I find that I'm actually more comfortable, because there's something about chairs. And it's actually, this is a funny little thing I'll tell you about me, is that I do a lot of yoga. And there's something about chairs. After you do yoga for a while, you kind of get like, why do we sit in this weird position? It's terrible for your body. And my back starts to hurt. My sciatic gets inflamed. And I'm generally uncomfortable. So I've created a standing desk here. And I just stand the whole time. It's actually quite nice because I could just kind of move around. And secretly, I also hope it helps me lose weight. Okay, so,
like getting your steps in.
Yeah, I put my phone in my pocket so I can count for the steps, 1 or 2 steps. Yeah, so anyway, so today we're going to be talking about empathy. Now, I chose this topic actually because someone suggested it to me, and I was like, sure, I think it's a great topic. In fact, I think it's super important because, in fact, that's part of the problem in the world, is that a lot of people don't harvest empathy, and some people don't even know what it is. And they're like, what is that? So we're here to talk about it. We're here to define it. We're here to explore it and figure out what it means to be empathetic. So we have a guest on that I thought was really good to talk about this. And her name is Candace. I'm going to bring out Candace.
Hello.
Woo-hoo.
Hi.
Yay.
Welcome, Candace. Why don't you tell us who you are first?
Yeah, so hi everyone. I am Candace, or Candace Marie Dominatrix of the Temple of Frolic. I am kind of like a sacred sex, life, love, wellness coach and body worker. I work with individuals, couples, as well as I have created and held space for quite a variety of events and workshops and classes. And I'm really, really excited to be here. Empathy is, it's very near and dear to me. And it's something that I put regular attention and practice into. So I'm really excited to be here and talk about it.
Awesome.
Fantastic. Well, I'm certainly glad you're here. Thanks for coming, Candace. And I want to just say, like, the first thing that comes to mind, and true, a person already kind of said it in the room. Sandy said, a lot of people have no empathy or sympathy. I think we should define the difference between those two, because sometimes people get them a little mixed up. And sometimes I think that that's not really helpful in the long run. So what do you, hey, Candace, have you ever had do you know a good way to define the two?
I would say sympathy is like, I feel bad for you, or like could be a conscious pity party, or kind of like pity. And empathy is like, it's a more visceral, open, um curious, listening kind of way of relating to someone and or a situation.
Mm-hmm. 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 I would say for sure, and I think they teach you this if you're a counselor, or you take psychology course or whatever. They teach you the difference between the two, and I guess they teach you because they teach you that sympathy is kind of a way of taking in the other person's emotion, where you kind of almost swallow it as well, or take in the person's pain or whatever they're going through. Where empathy is a bit more, I guess, like Candace said, a little bit more like a curious feeling, like a feeling of, wow, you stay separate in your own boundary and your own space, and you're also having an empathetic experience. Feels like, oh, I see that you're in pain. I hear that you're in pain. I hear that it's hurting and it's suffering for you. And that's at least how you can verbally let somebody know that you're being empathetic. Um, and I think sometimes it's it's definitely a vibration or a feeling where sympathy feels more like you're swallowing it with them.
That's funny because I've always understood, like the way I've always understood it is like sympathy is like to me was I understand what you're going through, but I don't feel it. And then to me, empathy was I understand what you're going through and I feel it. So I have always understood it like that. Maybe I'm wrong because I myself, like, I always considered myself a sympathetic person in the sense like I could understand what somebody's going through, but I don't always internalize it and feel it with them. Where with empathy, people are like, oh, I'm so empathic. I felt what they were going through. And I guess with listening to people, it always sounded to me, it's like they understood and they took it in. Whereas with the empathy and the sympathy was more like, I understand, but I don't feel it. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean that's what they taught me in school,
Right.
and I thought that it was really helpful because they teach you as a counselor, not that even as a nurse they teach you this as well. They teach you not to that sympathy is not helpful,
Right.
because then you put yourself in pain too. Now you're not helping. The empathy is actually more helpful, where you can validate the person. Candace, you got something to help us with this?
Yeah, one of the prime examples. So, I'm newly blind in essence, and sometimes when people find out, I get a variation of responses. But when I get sympathy versus empathy, it's an entirely different vibration. Like, I feel worse about being blind than I did before getting on the phone with them or being in their presence. Like, I'm cool about it, but all of a sudden you have a problem with it. They're making it about them. I think that's another piece. I'm not saying sympathy always means that, and that, what Lacrosse had mentioned is a beautiful example of what conscious sympathy could be, versus, I don't know what we would call what I'm talking about. Pity party.
Right. Yeah.
Right, exactly.
That makes sense.
I find empathetic. I think my response to you, Candace, when I found out you were blind was, whoa, well, my dad had that. And, he was really an awesome dad, and he still managed to do a lot of things. I know it's hard. I'm happy to help you in any way I can. And I also know that you can live a really cool life, even though you have that disease, same exact disease. And so I think that's a great example of a way of helping, like showing that you understand. I hear you and I understand and comprehend what that means to be blind, because not everybody comprehends, I think, totally what that even means. Um, and you can find ways to say, or to at least be hopeful or validating. I think at least validating is necessary. But some people would come across with the what's it called, positive, where you just go over the bad part with positive messages. And I don't mean to do that, but I probably come across that way sometimes, because I always have this positive out, and I can't help it. I'm naturally optimistic. I'm naturally believe that anyone can overcome anything. So Chanel is saying that narcissistic people have no empathy, but spathic people can feel pain for others and separate the emotions of yours from theirs. Okay, I'm not sure. I think she means empathetic people. I think she just misspelled it. Empathetic people. For sure, narcissism is a huge problem in the United States. It's a huge problem. And you're exactly right, that narcissism essentially keeps people from having empathy. So that's exactly what the disease is, really. And it's a mental disease. And I think that narcissists, I think what we forget, if we're empathetic people, we forget that the narcissist is actually a very hurt and damaged person. And that we have to, it's fine to draw boundaries. It's fine to get your space and keep yourself safe in every way. And I think you should. And we have to find healing for those people. And it doesn't mean that those people need to be crucified and that they have nothing to offer the world. They do, but they also need help, because they're usually mentally and emotionally damaged. There's a reason they're not empathetic. The reason they're not empathetic, narcissists, the reason that they're not empathetic is because they're insecure. They actually themselves are some of the most insecure people on the planet. And you can see that in many of the leaders, like Joseph just mentioned in the chat. You can see that the leaders of the world are easy to look at as narcissists. Those are the people that we can go, oh my, what happened to him? Okay, do an Oprah. When you see a narcissist, I find that the best thing to do is do what Oprah does, which is she says, what happened to you?
Right.
Because seriously, what happened to you? Because being empathetic is being a human being, really. And how do we lose this empathy? That's, if it comes naturally, if it comes naturally, if empathy, does it come naturally? Are children born empathetic? So what do you guys think of that?
That's funny.
Or they taught it?
Because like growing with I would say with the definition that I gave you that I understood it by, I was always terrified of being empathetic. Because I was like, I never wanted to be that person. Like I wanted to be able to hear you out and understand what you're going through and be a support, but I don't want to feel it. Like, that's what I'm saying. Like, from my understanding, which is why I remember I messaged us, I don't think I'm very empathetic because, I'm the first one where I'm like, I need a boundary here. Like, so is there a possibility that, the misunderstanding of empathy is like being able to relate to that person, be supportive to that person, but having boundaries at the same time for your own protection?
Mm-hmm. I think what I happen to know also is that it feels to me, in all the work I've done with children, some children naturally are more empathetic. I've seen 2-year-olds be super empathetic, and some 2-year-olds throw a toy at someone and you have to teach them, now you just threw the toy at your friend and now they're crying. Is that really what you meant to do? And that's teaching empathy to the child, right? So I wonder if that's not in our personalities, right? Because our personalities help us define. I think it does seem to come up that way because it seems to be random to me. Some children are very empathetic and some children are not. And it does not always have to do with their parents' teaching. I've seen parents work very hard at teaching their children empathy, and they're kind of flabbergasted that their child is not empathetic. And, you know, I don't think, I think what happens there, hold on, there we go. So
Yeah.
I think what happens there is that some children just need to learn empathy, while some children have it naturally. Now, some kids I have seen, I was a preschool teacher with 2-year-olds, and I'll tell you, there were some kids that were too empathetic. They were so sensitive that I felt like I had to bubble them up, you know? So I think, Lacrosse, what you're actually saying is that because some of your placements probably in your personality, who you are, maybe your astrology chart, when people believe in that, would define how empathetic you are and how much boundaries you have. Because I've seen kids be super sympathetic.
I've seen adults, like, yeah, I've seen people that they're just like, it's spewing out of them. And I'm like, doesn't this hurt? Like, to get to, like, of course feel something, but when they're so caught up in the empathy, when it's too much and they're literally feeling that pain, living that pain with that person to the point that they're becoming damaged from it. So I think that was always my fear of empathy, because I never wanted to get to that point where I'm feeling so much that it's detrimental to me. So I've always feared empathy, you know?
Yes. And that what you're actually fearing, I think, Lacrosse, is sympathy. You're actually fearing sympathy. You're sensing that there's a strong boundary between empathy and sympathy. And that's because you're naturally emotionally intelligent, according to your astrology chart.
Right.
Okay. So some people have to learn where those boundaries are. Some of us get trauma in childhood that makes us forget and not know where those boundaries are. So you will also see that. As a nurse, I witnessed people. There were some, I would train other nurses, and they would literally become so sympathetic to the person that it was hard for them to even move on to the next person. And I'm like, look, you have 10 people and I'm not saying don't feel sensitive for this person, but we have to, you have to make space for everybody. And I know that you're feeling really sympathetic for this person right now. And it would be healthier and better for them if you took a little bit of a step back. And I try to help them find where sympathy and where that boundary is. I try to help them find it. Not everybody's capable of finding it as easily. And I will say that some trauma seems to blur that line. They don't know where it is at all. I was actually surprised that I didn't blur that line too much, because I had my father was blind. And so I was his caretaker my whole life. From 5 years old until I was 25, the moment he died, I was his caregiver. And that's kind of a wound in a way, to be a caregiver for your parent at 5 years old, right? Okay. But I learned I had a good sense of empathy. And even my teachers in nursing would say, you have a good sense of empathy. And that is where also there were some nurses that came in that had no empathy. Okay, they had no sympathy, no empathy, and I'm like, oh my gosh, slow down. This person is handicapped, and they only lay in their bed one way, and you're just kind of tossing them around the bed here. Uh, Slow down, and pay attention and be aware of how you might be hurting or affecting this person's body, because that's your job as a nurse if you're moving a person around. Okay, a person that can't move themselves around. And so that's kind of, I guess it's a fine line. I think it's a fine line, maybe even a hard line to find. And for sure, something about trauma throws it off. Candace, have you noticed a particular type of trauma that blurs that line?
So for me, I feel like my trauma did impact this, in the sense of, because my primary caregivers and the people that I loved were also my abusers. I can have empathy for a lot of things. Some things that maybe, you know what I mean, I shouldn't have, or as a child I didn't know. There's no differentiating, right? And so the lines got blurred because I had these people that I loved that were taking care of me that I also couldn't trust. And so there's that component. And then, but it also made me, I feel like, super empathic, which you talked about, which can go right hand in hand with being very empathetic. Because with the trauma, my brain, in order to survive, what it did is said, I need to go and fragment out and stretch my energy like really far and read everything that's going on, because what is coming out of people's mouths is not what's really going on. So I had to be a mind reader really young. So I think those are the components for me that I feel like sometimes, I create some space. I have to be careful because I can be super empathetic, which is great for me, and my capacity to hold space for others. And then the other thought I had, like, I remember several clients have come through that work in like the caregiving field or trauma. They see a lot of trauma, EMTs, firefighters, stuff like that. And the energy drainage, when they don't, there's some level of soul care, I guess it was what I would call it, when you're holding that much space, for just being empathetic. Like, that's very natural. You have to be in certain fields.
For sure. I noticed that too, Candace, as a nurse. I noticed that if people weren't doing their soul work, or they didn't have some sort of soul feeding practice outside of work, that they were going to crash really fast. And nursing, especially CNAs, or people that work with the elderly, because it feels hopeless, or hospice, because the person's eventually going to die. That's the whole point, really. And if they don't do some sort of soul work around that, they're probably going to crash, and they'll quit or start calling out a lot or something like that. I agreed about trauma that it creates this. I also had that sort of hyper awareness that happened because I was traumatized as a child. I became very hyper aware of my world and was always afraid. And I was taking care of my father, right? So I had to be aware of when there was a step down, when there was a step up at 5 years old. I had to be aware of not running my father into a sign if we walked down the street. I had to learn how to go grocery shopping, all kinds of things. I wrote my father's checks at 6 and 7 years old. And when you become hyper aware like that, you develop a special sense. And I would call that empathy, or being an empath. Now, what happens is sometimes some people develop this empathic ability, which is actually your superpower, but sometimes it can come out and be expressed in a not so great way or toxic way, or depending on how you want to word it. It's not always the greatest expression of it, because you can kind of become super codependent, to a way that you're like, oh yeah, no, I don't, the person ends up like over caretaking, or if they take responsibility, if Lacrosse, you got pissed off and I take responsibility for your emotion, your tantrum is not mine, right? Or Candace has a meltdown, her meltdown is not mine, right? I can be empathetic for her and listen to her and say, wow, Candace, gosh, I really hear your pain. That sounds really hard. I can relate by saying, I have been through something like that before. I can really get where you're coming from. Or I could say, Lacrosse, I get why you're mad, man. I get it, right? I totally get exactly what you're talking about. That's happened to me before. And that's validation and that's understanding. And I think that's fine from an empathetic perspective. But if I took it on and was like, sympathetic would be like, or a toxic version of an empath would be, it's my fault. It's my fault that Candace is upset. I can fix it for her. I'm going to fix it now. Or, Lacrosse, I hear that you're mad. Let me make everything around you okay so that you're no longer mad.
Right.
Those,
actually the direction I was going to ask about, like, at what point, like, is codependency like a toxic version? Because, like, I remember, like, even within myself, I had to endure an addict for how many years, and I endured and endured and endured, became so codependent and made it my life's responsibility to help that person overcome that addiction. And to the point where I was just like, when I finally reached that point where I'm like, I'm not the addict. I'm not the person who's doing these things. And it took many years to, and sometimes I think that blurred line kind of, despite you could get healing and all that, there's always a chance of that blurred line coming back and you falling into those habits. And I think now it's just a matter of being able to see them and say, wait a minute. Once again, that, put the brakes on and say, yeah, no, this is too familiar. Because, like, the minute I see a situation like that happening, it's way too familiar. This behavior is too familiar. I literally cut off. I'm just like, I can't even give a chance because of the trauma that caused.
And what you're talking about, Lacrosse, is absolutely valid. That's exactly what happens. And I think some of us that have been through trauma, when we do recognize what it looks like, we know what an addict looks like. I'm not particularly fond of being around people that do a lot of drugs and alcohol, for instance. It's just not my thing. I don't do a lot of it. I don't like to be around people that do a lot of it. And if you do it to an excess where I know you've been drinking, I'm probably not going to want to hang out, right? Like, I just don't, right? And it's because I grew up around people with drinking problems. So, and I've had partners that had drinking problems, and I just don't, it's not comfortable for me. And so I feel that because I know that the toxic behaviors can come up and they could trigger my toxic behaviors. And so that's a boundary. That's a boundary, and you're allowed to have it. Mm-hmm. And I don't know what it is about boundaries that sometimes makes people feel uncomfortable to, number one, speak them, to number two, have them, or to help other people know where they are. How are we supposed to know we're making you uncomfortable if you never tell us your boundaries? Right. And so I say that to people because I feel that boundaries are part of empathy, because if you have boundaries, it's easier to be empathetic. So our friend Eve here is saying it is hard at times to be a very empathetic person whom people gravitate to, particularly many people who are dealing with their downtrodden or abused by the system. The compassion can make it such that we feel like we have to help everyone and they suck our energies away with too much of their negative experience and energy. That's right, Eve. And she also said, they also said, this is one thing I feel I need to build because I'm an interfaith minister and I'll soon be studying for law school. And Eve, I just want to say, please learn it. Please learn where your boundaries are, because you will be a better minister because of it. And I noticed that when I didn't know where my boundaries were as far as empathy goes, like how much can I help? What can I do for you? How can I help you? How can I support a person? Those are the ways. How can I validate this person if they're feeling, because people, man, there's a lot of problems in the world, right? It doesn't take long to find a person that's been abused by the system. Well, I'm pretty sure all three of us have. Okay. It doesn't, you don't have to look far. And I think the best way, some of the number one thing that a lot of people need is validation. They need to be validated. What do you find? Hey, Candace, what do you find the best way to validate someone is?
So I was just thinking self-empathy, right? However we can get that or give that to ourselves. And then the other thing I was thinking, so I go to an empathy practice group every week, and when someone is new, we often guide them through helping them find out, label, identify, and communicate what their feelings and their needs are. And we have a list of like feelings and needs because sometimes we just don't have the language to really communicate our needs. And I just have seen so often that so many challenges or uproars internally, when you sprinkle like the magic of empathy on it, it just kind of, and it is a form of validating one's feelings. And there's many ways to do that. It is. Excuse me. I feel like empathy is a form of validation.
Right. Yeah, definitely. Have you ever, I don't know if you've ever experienced this, lacrosse, but you're having a shitty day and you tell somebody, oh my God, I'm having a shitty day. This is what happened. And they're like, oh man, that sucks. Yeah, man. I had a day like that just 3 days ago. I feel for you, man. Man, I'm sorry you're having that day. I hope the rest of your day gets better. You ever had someone do that to you?
Yes. And actually, I'm notorious for apologizing. Like I've seen, like, I guess it's, you have the standard for yourself that you have for others. Like when somebody can sit there and look at me and say, oh, damn, yeah, this happened to me. And I get it. I feel it. I'm sorry, and that does give you a sense of, and it's a more healthy way of dealing with it. I don't expect for everybody to like 100% validate everything that happens to me. But I think, like you said, in just those few moments of a person saying, yeah, I get it, it makes you feel less alone. It makes you feel less isolated. And that to me is more important than anything, because a lot of us think when a crisis is happening, we're the only ones who are going through it at that moment, but when you have somebody who really identifies with that, then you're like, oh, okay. You hear me, you see me, that goes a long way.
Yeah, I think being seen and being heard are hyper important, because that's really what the other person needs. They don't need you to fix it. Sometimes it's not even a fixable problem. And then they start to talk about unsolicited advice. And that's something I sometimes struggle with. Like if somebody shares with me that they have a problem with something, then I kind of want to, I kind of have the, especially if I've had the problem before, I could be like, oh, I had that problem. You know what I did? And then I'll tell them. And that's called unsolicited advice. I do that sometimes. I totally admit it. I do it. I don't mean, and then
Guilty.
usually I'm like, shit, that was unsolicited advice. So what I have to do is I have to change my reaction to their, instead of, and that's Virgoian actually. So if you're into astrology, I'm a Virgo. And I have a Libra moon, so I tend to I tend to have these things ingrained in me. I can totally understand. The nice thing about a Libra moon is I can totally know what the other person is going through. I'm actually really good at putting myself in other people's shoes. But as a result, I also, what the part of it that's the challenge part of those signs is that sometimes we want to fix things, or we can sometimes do some codependent things. So I try not to give myself a hard time about it. If I do it, I'll apologize to the person. Sorry, I didn't mean to give you unsolicited advice. Hopefully I remember to do that, because sometimes I don't realize I did it until like the next day or 2:00 in the morning while I'm like, oh no, I gave them unsolicited advice. And what I need to say instead is, if someone shares with you about something that's going on for them, and you do have they may not know that you know. If someone shares with me that they're having a hormone problem, they may not know that I'm kind of masterful with herbs when it comes to hormones. They're not going to know that unless I share that with them. So sometimes I'll say, I've used a lot of herbs for my hormone problems. So if you decide that you want to use herbs, just let me know, and I could probably guide you or point you in a good direction. So I try to say that instead of, oh, you might want to take black cohosh, you know?
Right.
Because I just want to fix it for them.
Yeah.
But I do sometimes have the answers. That's the way Virgos are. Virgos have sometimes answers to problems. We are born that way. And so I think you have to take into consideration your own personality. What part of you, Pisces are super empathetic. They probably are sympathetic. They probably naturally, if you have a strong Pisces placement, you'll be naturally sympathetic.
And Cancers, right?
And Cancer, yeah, water signs.
I noticed my wife does something, and it's something I'm trying to kind of catch on to, because she doesn't want to fix it. She can't. But the first thing is there anything I can do to help? Like, just ask me that flat out. And I'm trying to get into the habit of doing the same thing. Is there anything I can do to help? Because you, like you said, you could have the answer. Like, a lot of times, I think I always have the answer. I'm always Mr. Answer. And I'm like, oh, what are you talking about? I know what to do, but yeah. And sometimes Lee, bring it down a notch, okay? Get that ego down here, But with her, it's like, when she does that, I'm like, that's a really good way of doing that without, like in my case, because I'm Mr. Know-It-All, without being Mr. Know-It-All. And I realized I'm trying so hard to adapt that. It's hard, but that's something that I've been trying to adapt to.
Yeah. And I think, it takes time to change habits. So, and I always give myself a break if I mess up, and just apologize to the other person. I know I'm very forgiving. So if people come back to me and they're like, I'm sorry I did this, I'd be like, oh, it's no problem. It's no big deal. I'm usually very forgiving. So I hope that people give me the same forgiveness.
Give me the same mercy.
Please give me the same mercy. I want to bring up Eve's comment here. Those of us who have been in abusive families or have had abusive partners learn compliance, as we have been blamed so much for other people's moods. Yes, we have to learn that boundary setting if we are to survive healthfully. That's true. Others can be manipulative and use our need to not make someone mad by acting out and guilting us into doing what we want otherwise. You are absolutely right, Eve. You're 100% right that you, especially if you've been with an addict, an alcoholic, or any kind of person with an addiction, or a narcissist, that is their, from a mental health perspective, that is one of the strongest ways of removing accountability for them. So because they're feeling insecure about their own emotions and their own feelings, they don't even know how they got there in a shitty mood or whatever's going on for them. Instead of them just expressing their shitty mood, they instead make it all about you. You are absolutely right, Eve. And when that happens, if someone is blaming you for their bad mood, especially if you know it's not yours, if you know for sure that you didn't do anything, you check in with yourself. Please check in with yourself first. I would say to stay away from the person until they calm down and then try to have a conversation about blaming. Some of us naturally blame others. We're taught to. My mother, oh my God. I used to get mad at her because she would blame my friends for me acting out. Like, seriously. I'd be like, Mom, are you serious? She would say that my friends made me act out, and I would just get very upset about this over time. As a teenager, I got upset about it because I felt that the accountability, I don't know, I guess I was just a little bit bothered by it. But some people naturally just blame. They just, they don't, they don't, they just blame other people for things. And I'm not really sure why they do it, but they do. And I think some people can stop doing that or become aware of it and hopefully back off on it anyway. But a narcissist is probably likely to gaslight you. So I'm just going to say that if you don't know what gaslighting is when you say, I felt yesterday it was really unfair when you came home from work. I felt that you made your bad mood about me, and I felt that that was unfair. And I just want you to be aware that this is the third time you've blamed me for something I felt that I had nothing to do with. And I feel like you blaming me causes problems in our relationship, and I wish this wouldn't happen. And I hope that we could find a way to change it. If you say that to a narcissist, they're likely to gaslight you, and this is what it will sound like. You're making shit up. What are you talking about? This is ridiculous. I don't know what you're talking. Okay, and they dismiss your emotions. They don't hear anything you've said. That's gaslighting. They tell you you're crazy, and it can make you feel kind of crazy. Candace, I'm sure you've had the gaslighting experience, because that's lacking empathy right there, right?
Yeah, one of my thoughts was, when someone is doing that, may they be narcissist or whatever it is, like as we mentioned earlier, they're feeling like a victim. I feel like it's that victim mentality. So they genuinely, on some level, believe that you are making them this way. I'm not saying that's like every, I feel like that's just a commonality when you think of someone who has a lot of trauma. And yeah. I just feel like you said earlier, shining the light on what is it that causes someone to act in those ways. And I think I was listening when we talked the other day, you had mentioned how we all, on some human level, have variations of narcissism, Yep. Yeah, I'm not super fluent in the term or the definition, but the behavior, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, we could see it pretty easily in our political leaders. That's a real easy example. When you find a leader is triggering you, when you look at a leader that is lacking empathy, it becomes real clear, real fast. You know exactly who they are. Um, so, yeah. And one of the things, and that leads me to one very important statement is, why do we need empathy? Why is it important? Why is it necessary, right? Not only so first of all, it helps improve relationships, friendships, love relationships, any kind of relationship you're in. It's going to help it. It's going to support it. It's going to, if you can be empathetic instead of sympathetic, first of all, you'll be able to be around that person. Because if you're sympathetic the whole time, you're going to probably be pretty exhausted. Especially if that person has a lot of emotional experiences or they're going through a rough time. Everybody, if you're in a relationship with somebody, whether you're a friend with them or an LTR, a romantic relationship, every single person in the world goes through shit for a while. I don't think any of us would dare say, oh, I'm happy all the time. Who could say that, right? There are times that we struggle, and that's what our friends are for. Our friends are here to be our support system, but it doesn't mean that they need to give so much or take the pain away or even fix it, right? So why do we think empathy is important? Why is it important? Why do we need it?
As in, sorry, I was just say, just if you clarify the question, as in having the skill of being able to give empathy or receiving empathy?
I think both. Why do we need empathy around? Why do we need to be able to give it and receive it, really? Because some people are not even able to receive empathy, right?
Yeah. And I think, like you said earlier, on a basic level, we all want to be heard, understood, and validated. Um, it's just like, toast without butter, or whatever you put on your toast. Empathy is like that butter just comes over your dry toast or burnt toast or whatever it is, and voila, it's like magical and different.
Well said, Candace. I love that. It's
now
like
I'm gonna remember, empathy is butter on the toast. Is butter on the toast.
Or jelly or fluff or whatever you
want. Strawberry preserves, I prefer.
Cream cheese. All right. Right? Yeah. So I think empathy is necessary. In fact, I don't think a healthy relationship will survive without empathy. Can you think of a relationship that lacked empathy in your life in the past that lacked empathy? Did it last?
I got too many to count. No. And we're even talking, and this is, like you said, it's just not limited to lovers or partners. It's friendships. It's family. Some families completely cut because there's just that lack of thereof. And bottom line, like, to me, like, when it comes to things like that, like, even with family, if you want to be seen and you want to be heard, and that is and validated, and that is what empathy is. When you have somebody who doesn't show any empathy, basically you don't exist to them, is what it boils down to. And you don't really have any value to them. So
I'm going to use an example of a time that I'm thinking of. I was trying to think of some examples of empathy because sometimes it's hard to describe, right? So it's sometimes easier to give examples. And I used to visit nursing homes around the country. And I would go into a group of people that was gathered by the adult director, the entertainment director of the nursing home, and they would usually put a group of people that were willing to come down to the public room together in a circle, and I would ask them to be in a circle. And this one particular time I was in New Mexico, and I noticed that, I had gotten everybody in their wheelchairs or chairs or whatever, walkers, in a circle. And I put Bright Hawk in the middle, and she's playing her music and telling stories. And there's one particular guy who's way out. And I kind of notice him, and I'm looking at him, and he's got tattoos that indicate he's young. He's not that old. But he looked like he was part paralyzed. And he had a tattoo that indicated he was part of a gang. And he had some black teardrops, and things like that. And sometimes that means you've killed somebody. Okay. It doesn't always, but sometimes it does. And so I came up to him and I was like, "Hey, why are you way back here? How come you don't want to join the group?" He's like, "If you knew who I was, you wouldn't want me to join the group." And I was like, sometimes people do shit that's bad. Doesn't mean you're a bad person. It just means you did something bad. That's all it means, man. And, he thought, and so I went around and visited everybody again, and I was dancing with them and such. And I came back to him, and I was like, "You want to come up and join the group, man? Because I think you should join the group." And he kind of looked at me with this, "I can't believe you've come back and now invited me again." It was almost as if he couldn't believe that I could accept that he had done a terrible thing. And I got down and squatted down in front of him, and because he's in a wheelchair, right? And so I squatted down and I looked him in the eye and I said it again. Sometimes people do shit bad. It doesn't mean you're a bad person. And it certainly doesn't mean that you don't belong in the group. And he said, "Okay, fine." So I pushed him up to the circle. And he danced with me and his aunt, who I didn't know was his auntie at the time. It was an older woman, and I didn't know who she was. She had danced with me. And afterwards, she had tears rolling down her face. And she came to me and she said, "Oh, wow, that is my nephew. And ever since there was this gun thing," it was in New Mexico, in Albuquerque, he just, he won't be part of the group, and you helped him. Thank you so much. And she was really his auntie. And he only had one side of him to dance. But that moment in time of me validating that I hear you, that you've done something bad, but that doesn't mean you don't get to be part of this group. That really changed it for him. Like, it really changed it for him. And she validated that to me, and she was in tears. She was so moved. And I was like, "That's what we do, sweetie. It's okay. We love you." Give her a big hug, and everybody deserves love, even those guys. Even people in prison, even narcissists, even killers, child molesters. And I know that that's going to stir the pot. People don't like when I say that. But the fact of the matter is that we're all human beings. And I'm not saying that you need to cut your boundaries down, but a little bit of empathy could go a long way. That's it. I know it's a tough subject. Go, Candace.
Yeah, I was going to say there's a quote that I think I'm going to get it right by Marshall Rosenberg, the creator of nonviolent communication. And he says, like, every violent, most unthinkable act is a desperate attempt to get one's most human, precious needs met. Not saying it's okay, that's empathy right there. Just like, for whatever reason, yeah, that's what works for them.
Beautiful. Thanks for sharing that, Candace. That's absolutely, you're absolutely right. And unfortunately, most of the people that are sick are super insecure or really hurt, damaged in some ways. And that's what's happening, and that's what's going on. They're human beings, and they've been through some shit, no doubt. And I'm sure that guy had been through some shit, and now look, he was paralyzed. Half of his body was paralyzed, and doesn't mean that he can't be part of the group ever. He was punishing himself, right? So anyway, we're going to take a little commercial break with this deep, beautiful topic. We're going to come back. We're going to talk more about empathy, but I want to encourage everyone watching the show right now, if you have a dream that you would like to get interpreted by lacrosse, type it up in the chat, and we will read it out and have it after the commercial break. When we come back, we'll have lacrosse interpret someone's dream. We'll be back.
Tune in to Kaleidoscope Eyes with your host, Transman Lacrosse Ortiz. Every week, we will be touching topics within the LGBTQIA plus community. We will also be having interviews with individuals within the community and allies. Journey with us as we share in their struggles and triumphs every Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern.
WLFE-DB Radio has LGBTQ shows like Across the Pond, Rainbow Soul, Everything Yet Nothing, and Inside the Drag Closet. Check out the schedule on WLFE-DB.com. You can even watch them on TV at WLFE-DB.com under LGBTQ Friends, right off our website. Again, it's WLFE-DB.com for your LGBTQ shows and more.
WLFE-DB.com, where talk radio is a whole lot better. Our shows are your shows, and that there makes for a great talk radio. Oh, yeah. Life just got sweeter now that WLFE-DB has merchandise. Show your support by purchasing your t-shirts for WLFE, Paratalk Radio, Inside the Drag Closet, and more. But it doesn't stop there. T-shirts, coffee mugs, tanks, buttons, cloth bags, and more. Go to WLFE-DB.com. On the top bar, click on the merchandise tab and bam, there you go. You got merch. Support the shows. WLFE-DB.com.
Hey.
Welcome back. Welcome back, everyone. Hey, Lacrosse.
Hey. I got more lights on, and now it's even hotter.
So it'd just be the two of us out here for a minute while you do your dream interpretation. Okay. Candace will stay behind stage for a minute, and we got Sandy Griffin shared her dream. My dream, I had a reoccurring dream where all of my deceased family members and I are together talking and laughing, except my mom. She's always looking at me like she's sad and never speaks to me. Wow. What do you think's going on there?
Well, basically, I mean, family represents, okay, well, I always try and clear things up. When I interpret dreams, you are everybody in your dream. Like, it's like parts of your subconscious or whatever. Family represent ancestors. Also, family represent, like, you're having a good time. There's lots of freedom. There's lots of joy, except for your mom. Mothers are maternal. They're protectors. They're good at being guilty. They're so good at being guilty or feeling guilty. I don't know a decent mother who never feels like she hasn't done enough, or she's never, like a good mother always wants to do more and more and more. With that being said, what I'm getting from this is, why do you feel you might not be doing enough for yourself, that you're almost in your own way of being happy or having joy and freedom? That's what it kind of goes back around to. Like, you don't feel like you're doing enough. Because I mean, why would she be sad? Like, there would no other be reason, unless there's a loss, but at the end of the day, a mother always feels like, what can I do more? I, like, even with my own children, I do for them and want to do more and more and more, because it's just your instinct. But I also know I can get in my own way and do too much for them, and then they don't appreciate it, and then here I am back at square one. But at the same token, a mother will also have to sometimes step back and live for herself. So once again, what is it that is becoming this obstacle that you might feel guilty, or you might feel like you shouldn't be happy, or you feel guilty about being happy or guilty about feeling joy? I don't know if Hollis sees anything else.
I wonder about, Sandy, about your relationship with your mom. Like, that's the first thing that, like, bing, bing in my head. But your deceased family and you're all talking together. Is your mom also passed away? And I wonder if okay, you weren't there when she passed, but she's also passed away. Okay. Well, that's interesting. Because what I want to say here is that I think that the people on the other side are asking you to recognize, okay, you loved her to pieces. She was my mother and father. Okay, great. So you and your mom sounds like you had a decent relationship. So the first thing that comes to mind for me as a medium and a coach to help people with grief and stuff is that I'm wondering what's going on with your relationship with the dead. Do you believe that you can talk to them? Because you can. And I would bet any amount of money that, especially since you and your mom had a good relationship, that your mom is your guardian. And she may be sad and silenced in your dream as a reflection of your actual life practice. That the dead are, especially since this is a reoccurring dream, that the dead are actually knocking on your door. They're saying, hey, talk to us. Recognize your ancestors. Did you ever watch the movie Coco? kind of like that. The movie Coco, if you haven't watched it, you should watch it. It's a good movie.
It's a good movie.
Yeah, it is. And it helps you understand why it's important to keep in touch with your ancestors. And we'll do a show on that at some point, some mediumship type stuff. But just a thought, Sandy. That's the first thing as I read your dream and was listening to you across. I also was thinking, yeah, like what part of her mother, like, you know what I mean? Like exactly what you said. So I kind of vibed with what you said as well across, like what part of you isn't taking care of yourself or not approving of yourself or something. Yeah. But at the same time, dreams can have, I think, multiple meanings.
Multiple. Absolutely.
Oh
I was
man.
gonna say 100%. Dreams can go like I said. You have somebody who can interpret this way and somebody who can interpret that way. I don't know if there is any right or wrong interpretation because it's all interpretation. It's just a matter of what a person can pick apart and see and help, because that's the bottom line, is helping.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sandy, you're saying I do see flashes out of the corner of my eye sometimes. Yeah, and different energy, different ancestors often have different ways of communicating with us. So I have an ancestor who likes to come through my dreams. And then I have another ancestor. She was like my stand-in mom. She like stood in as a mom because my mom wasn't capable. But my father, he tends to come in through numbers, symbology, and even as a rabbit jumping by in front of my car or something like that. And the reason I know is because when I was at his grave, a rabbit came up to me at his grave, like a wild rabbit. Wild rabbits don't normally come up to people. So if you have some experience like that, be aware that it's probably an ancestor reaching out to you. And so, Sandy, it doesn't just have to be something you see in that way. Like, you don't have to see the spirit to communicate with the spirit. There's other ways of communicating through symbology. My father, sometimes if I'm feeling really scared, I'll feel his hand on my arm, on my shoulder. Now, remember, he was blind. So that's how he would touch me a lot, right? So I would feel his hand on my shoulder, and then I would know that he was with me in that moment, especially if I'm feeling really scared or just, out of sorts in some way. He would come for me that way. My stand-in mom, she tends to come through astrology and magic because she was also my magic mom. She taught me a lot about magic and gardening and things like that. So, so I think every single one of our ancestors comes through in a different way, and that's a whole nother conversation. Don't worry, we'll have that conversation, Sandy, and I hope you're here with us on that time. I definitely have it on the schedule. Butterflies were trying to get in my house today. I felt it was my mom. It probably was then, Sandy. Yes. So your mom must be trying to reach out, so she might feel silenced.
Could be.
Yeah. So just want you to be aware of the other side, maybe. And, I don't know. It's a funny thing. Yep. Definitely comes through in weird ways. So we can get back to our topic, empathy. And, empathy has a lot of different faces and a lot of different ways of seeing it. And that's why I like to hear everybody's opinion. I think everybody's opinion is completely valid. And so let's bring Candace back out. Candace, welcome. Welcome, Candace. Welcome back. It was fun to interpret Sandy's dream. So glad we could do that. And it's a fun little thing we do. I think it's fun.
Oh yeah.
And so one of the things that I wrote down here on like some topics that we definitely want to talk about, and I just want to make sure we've talked about an empath. An empath is a person that seems to come from some sort of trauma or something. Not always, but sometimes they're just born that way. That's definitely, I've seen that too. And they're just born really sensitive kids. I met a kid that told his mom that he wouldn't eat animals. He was 4 years old. And I witnessed the whole thing, and I was like, whoa. And he was just like, I'm not eating animals. And he didn't eat animals until he was 16 years old. He would not. He would completely refuse to eat meat at the table. And we have no idea where he got it from. His entire family and everybody he knew was meat eater. And then he did eat meat through his teenage years, and then he went back to a vegetarian lifestyle as an adult. So, and he was just empathetic. He said he didn't think it was okay to kill animals. That's what he said. And nobody ever taught him that. We have no idea where it came from. It just sort of popped out. And so some kids are just
that way.
And what do you say? You know, that's what she felt. She was like, now I have to learn how to be a vegetarian cook. You know, she didn't know what to do. She was quite concerned. So anyway, so kids can come out that way. And then sometimes empathetic people are developed through trauma. And we talked about how that makes you hypersensitive to the world. And then you develop this hypersense. And then as a result, you can sometimes be too sensitive to people's, and I don't want to say I hate using that language, too sensitive. Is there a different way to say it, Candace? Is there a way to say what happens when an empath is around somebody that's like having a tantrum or something? There's definitely healthier ways to handle it, right?
Yeah. Well, that's why I think I was using the word being conscious with your sympathy and your empathy. You know, when some of us experience trauma, like it can be easy to not notice when the lines are being blurred. It's easy to get lost and not recognize when your boundaries are being crossed, or even know where they are, essentially.
And so when you find your boundaries and you know where they are, it's best to express them. And you'll know where your boundaries are. I think one of the ways that I started to recognize where my boundaries were is when you find yourself resenting what's happening. If you find yourself like, why does this person always get pissed off? They always are mad. They have an anger problem. And you find yourself judging them. You find yourself resentful in some way, or whatever happens inside your mind that makes you also, then you've probably gotten into more of a toxic space. So you might want to put some red flags up and ask yourself, wait a minute. I was in a fine mood before they came home, and now I'm making their mood about my mood. What's going on here? And that's probably a good red flag to pay attention to. Sometimes you might need to walk away from that person. You might need to take a walk, go outside, take a bath, get a shower, whatever you got to do to get space so that you can think more clearly. And I personally pray to my ancestors. And I say, help me find my clear boundary, help me define where it is, and help me say it in a good way. Does anybody else do anything like that? Pray or ask for help?
I honestly, like with me, when I start, and I, like you're saying with the too sensitive, like with me, it's, I get triggered, you know, like when I'm around somebody who starts giving me those feelings again, where I'm like, I start getting uncomfortable and edgy, and, you know, that's like, I don't know, in tune, because you've been there so many times. So I don't, you know, like with me, the minute I start feeling that like lack of peace, I literally have to step back, like you say, walk away. I try to walk away, start reevaluating. Okay, what's going on here? Why am I feeling this way? What's triggering me? You know, and then when I start process of elimination, oh, okay, here it is, and then I can actually, okay, so have I guess a name for it or whatever it is that I'm going through. Then I can say, okay, now, and then at that point, I start easing away, like because since I don't pray, I mean, all I can do is just like, yeah, let me back up a little bit, regroup. It's going to be a couple of days, you know, till I can actually get in contact with this person again. And then this time I'll be more prepared. You know.
So then you guard yourself for next time.
Yes.
How about you, Candace? What do you do when you find your boundaries have been crossed?
Well, there's a specific situation that keeps coming to mind, you know, and it's, you know, with my mom. And so since she's also one of like the originating sources of like a lot of my wounding. So with her, for some reason, for one, like she has the hardest time being empathetic with me. Just she, you know, she wore leather and dealt drugs, you know, she's a little rough around the edges. And then with me, I can just get easily triggered by her and not even realize what's going on. I'm not able to be empathetic for her. I'm not even able to be empathetic for myself. It's just, and you know, there's certain, as I learned, you know, there's certain relationships, you know, I have to really watch myself with. Yeah, and my mom is one of those people that I've learned time and time again, I have to be like really, really careful because I get so lost and I don't know where I end and she begins, essentially. That's kind of what happened. And then, you know, you had mentioned something earlier that really hit this in my heart. Yeah, we were talking about how we all need empathy. And then I was just reminded of that big wound I have that my mom, you know, like just can't, you know, it's like the hardest thing for her. And but when she does, oh my God, it's like my whole world just changes. Like it happened recently when I told her I was going through menopause. She sent me a message and said, "So how are you doing around that? I can imagine, you know, that's a big thing." And I was like, like, I felt like everything in my being, like I came from this, you know? So there's something for me, and I'm imagining for everyone, because that DNA, that, you know, the umbilical cord, we have strong reactions to certain relations. And yeah, like I'm right now, like I keep getting, I can notice I keep getting lost. Like even just thinking about her, I get into a mild trigger trauma, blah, 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 you know?
Yeah.
Just that I, like you were mentioning about your mom, like I'm sitting here thinking like when with my mother, oh, it was such a toxic relationship with mine, and may she rest in peace. But a part of me is like, what we were speaking about, how we get angry and resentful. Why is that? Like, why is it that it triggers you that, like, what is it that triggers a person that bad? Like, is it because there's a little bit of ourself in it? Or, you know,
I think what happens there, yeah, I think what happens is you're taking in their lack of empathy, their toxic behaviors, you're taking it in. And because especially with our mothers. Like, let me just say, this is why I don't really talk to mine. I just don't talk to her because for me, she doesn't have anything to offer me at all. So why would I bother? She's not empathetic to anybody. She's actually kind of narcissistic. And mostly, if I do think of something that she could offer me, I might call her, and almost always I regret it. Okay. And I'm like, oh shit, I shouldn't have called her about that recipe because now I'm triggered.
That was a high price to pay.
Right, for a recipe, right? Where I could have probably could have probably Googled it. Right? I think it was the last time I called her, it was last year. So I think what happens there, Lacrosse, why we get triggered, why we get so resentful, is actually because we're witnessing the abusive behavior that's hurt us. And so all of us have different ways of dealing with that abuse. Some of us talk a lot. Some of us put up our defenses and we're ready to. It's called fight, flight, freeze, fawn. I know there's one more. Did I forget one? These are all the trauma responses. Freeze, fight. Yeah. Okay. So fawning is when you've met this person, you get pissed off, Lacrosse, and they come up and they go, "Oh, honey, it's okay. It's okay. I think you're really hot. I like you." Mm-hmm. You've met this person. I know you've met this person. Right. And if you're pissed off,
I'm already pissed off.
That's not what you need, right? That's fawning trauma response. They're fawning you. Okay? Freeze trauma response is what I do, which is like this. Okay? You don't do anything. You just sit there and you're just like, holy shit, what is happening? Right? Okay? Run away is like, yeah.
Right.
Okay? Right? That's flight. And we all have and some people are just ready to kick your ass. You know, they're going to step up and fight you. Shut up, I'm going to punch you, right? And that's fight, right? And some people, I've witnessed the talkers. And I think that usually means it might have something to do with astrology, their astrology chart or their personality. And they will either over talk in the situation. They'll try to change the subject. They'll try to control the subject. And some people will try to take control. And that's also codependent behavior. Or they'll try to deflect from what's happening. And these are all valid. None of them are right or wrong, okay? They just are. And they're a reaction that is built into the human being because at one point we were wild human beings and we had to learn to run away. And then some of us had to learn to fight. Some of us just stood there and watched the whole thing go down. Okay, that's me. And and now some humans have learned to fawn. Okay, a lot of women, you will notice, will fawn. Yeah. And then some people will do the chatter, the talking, it's almost like a form of control. Because they want to take the control back because now this person has triggered them. So the trigger response is actually it's actually a natural occurrence in your body that is triggering you that you are in danger. The trick is when figuring out what your trauma response is. And usually this happens if someone is not being empathetic. Okay, this is what happens. Someone's not being empathetic, and I do this.
I can't see what you're doing. I'm just
I
imagining
know.
your freeze mode.
I'm not doing anything, Candace.
Yeah,
I'm just sitting
right.
with my face straight, nothing. And I'm just
I
like,
think I
nothing.
do that. I get that.
And that's a freeze trauma response. And and Candace, I wouldn't be surprised if you did that because, you can't see,
Mhm.
right? So it might be hard for you to run away in the moment. It might be the most obvious thing for you to do. Lacrosse, I wouldn't be surprised to see you fight or flight.
Both.
Um,
I'm one or the other. It depends on the circumstance because it's like
right.
if it's being the Libra, if there's an injustice, I will fight. But if I feel that it's not worth fighting for, I'm like, I'm out. I'm out. I'm not even gonna bother. Poof, you're out of my kingdom. You don't exist.
Right, that's Scorpio. Anyway, so we all have these trauma
Yeah.
responses, and they're
Right.
actually built into our bodies as a survival need. We needed these when we were, running from lions and shit like that. Okay, so your brain has gone, hey, there's a problem here. Pay attention, and your response is your response. Okay, and that's it's actually not a response; it's a reaction. Okay. The trick is to figure out what your reaction is, break yourself out of that reaction, and draw the boundary, which is actually harder than you think.
Oh,
It's easier if as you get more practice, and that's one of the things that BDSM teaches. So once you've been triggered, you go, holy shit, I'm going to fight. Wait a minute. I need to not beat the shit out of this person. Wait a minute. Wake up, Hollis. Like, I literally sometimes will smack myself in the face. I will kind of like clap my hands and try to snap myself out of it so that I can speak my boundary. Because most of the time I'm aware that my boundary has been crossed, and I'm not okay with your emotions right now. They're just too big for me. I'm going to have to leave. Okay? And it can be that simple. With your mom, you know what? The one time I had a conversation with my mom, I was like, Mom, you know what? I just can't stand this homophobic perspective you have. I'm done. Okay? I got to go. You're homophobic. Goodbye. Click. End of conversations. I'm done. So, and I had to break myself out of the freeze response, which she wasn't aware I was in because we were on the phone. And
right.
she's going on about stupid homophobic bullshit. And I'm going, right? And so that's what happens. I think that right there is what's happening, Lacrosse. So when you feel that resentment or whatever you feel, probably going to come up in the ways of judgment and like
Anger.
resentment.
Yeah,
Yeah, like
definitely angry. I get angry right from it's like people like, oh my god, why you get angry so fast? But, trigger. I'm out.
and you
Deuces.
just need to walk away. Yeah, and that's okay.
I was gonna say, sometimes I can have a quick trigger and be very quick to like tell somebody I gotta go,
Yeah.
and they try to bring closure to it or something. I'm like, no, I gotta go.
Yeah.
Like, I try telling people, like, sometimes when I'm in that space, I don't have the capacity to communicate nicely that I gotta go. So if I say I gotta go, please trust I gotta go. You know.
Yeah, it's because and that's the whole thing. This is like my original would be the fight. You're absolutely right. Fight. It's converted now to flight because honestly, at some point, I mean, I think we're all gonna have those triggers. Or the one of those happening all the time. And even though we smack ourselves out of it and go from one into the other, whether it's from freeze to walking away or anger to walking away, I think we're to flight. I think we're all going to go from one into the other.
Yeah, absolutely.
Works into maybe that empath, knowing how much can I feel or how much can I give before I can't give anymore and realize this is the boundary I have to put. because now it's taxing. Now it's too much.
Right. So when you recognize that you're giving too much, you can even apologize if you've already given too much and you realize it's too late. You can always be like, you know, I can't believe I've gone too far. I've given more than I probably should have. And it's not your fault. It's my fault. I didn't recognize the boundary. And now I'm having the boundary. And anyone that's empathetic, like me, if you said that to me, I'd be like, wow, well, I'm glad you knew. I'm glad you figured out where your boundary is. I'm glad you figured it out and have said something, because now I can even help you. And anyone that is empathetic, that really cares about you, that really loves you, is going to be like, oh, okay, well, let me help you hold that boundary then. And then if you cross it, the healthier person can be like, hey, do you realize are you crossing your boundary? You know what I'm saying? Because sometimes we do it out of habit because we learned it. We learned it from our parents. We learned it from our family. We learned it the way we grew up. And so the best thing we could do is to actually just, I find that I like to help people. If I know your boundaries somewhere in there, even if I'm not sure, I'll try to help you hold it from the other side. I'll be like, hey, I thought you only wanted to help once a week, and now you've helped me every day. Right. You sure that's what you want to be doing? You might be giving too much. Should we check in?
Right.
Okay. Go ahead, Candace.
I was just, thinking about the experience as someone who identifies as an empath, and especially now that I'm blind, like, I can feel what's going on, like, and if somebody's lying or not saying something, and I have a really hard time, like, especially when, someone is in an uproar having an issue. You can't make someone see something, and you can't make someone admit something. And so sometimes it's like I can't be empathetic to something that you're not even willing to admit is happening, kind of thing. Like that's definitely like there's like I almost want to say, that's why empathy is such a great tool to learn, because, you can help people and try to help them come to these awarenesses. But I definitely it's such a painful experience when it feels like, I could deal with it professionally. But when I'm trying to relate to someone or get to know someone in the dating world, and it feels like I'm pulling teeth, and I feel like they're just not, I'm getting two words. It's like, I have a short empathy fuse for that shit sometimes.
You know what I think you're describing, Candace? What it sounds like you're describing is a lack of vulnerability. And that happens a lot, especially with people that suffer from narcissistic behaviors. They kind of become a little guarded, and they don't even know they're doing it. Okay. Most narcissists are not aware that they're gaslighting you, that they're lacking empathy, or that they are not aware. Okay. That's the problem. Okay. Lacking vulnerability is a trigger for people because it is often the way we are abused by someone else. So, people that have been molested, people that have been raped, people that have been abused in relationships, friendships even are often abusive this way, because what happens is the person keeps themselves behind a guard the whole time, and the other person is giving up of themselves, giving up of themselves, giving up of themselves, and the other person never shares their same vulnerability, never says, I feel that way sometimes too. Or I can admit that I'm wrong sometimes, right? These are all ways of being vulnerable. Okay. And that's what it sounds like you're describing there, Candace. And that can trigger a response of exactly what you have there. Because I have a very similar reaction to people that are not vulnerable, because I've been in cults. And typically, the person that is abusing in a cult will lack vulnerability. That is one of the big things that they carry. Some of them will pretend to have vulnerability, but when you get to know the person a little deeper, you're kind of like, now, some people also that are famous will also reserve their vulnerability because they're afraid of being attacked in public, which is part of the problem of pedestaling people, which is when we expect more out of a person that's really even fair, since the person is just a human being. Just because they're famous doesn't mean they're special. It just means that they're famous. Okay. Doesn't mean that they should be better than everybody else. And that's a mistake that we play as human beings, as a culture. We pedestal people, and it's actually really, really, really wrong. And it's what happened to people like Michael Jackson, that we've watched crash over time, over a lifetime. We've watched his life as a child, and slowly over time, he became more and more and more mentally ill. Why? Because he was pedestaled and expected to be something he wasn't. And he was pedestaled and pushed into a corner, and he was never allowed to be vulnerable. And because if he was, and the times that he was vulnerable were inappropriate. Get it? See what happened there? Okay. So that's what I'm trying to say, is that all humans have the need to be vulnerable, but not everybody does it. And that is the wound of the narcissist. And Candace, it sounds like these people that do that have been your ex-partners or something like that, that you've had that experience in the past. And so you know that those people that are not being vulnerable are probably not going to be very empathetic to you.
Yeah.
And so
I
as a
think
result,
they're lying. They're hiding something. I can't trust them. There's no trust. Like,
It's the
yeah.
trigger is always there. The trigger is always there, and it's like the minute you see something familiar of hurt in the past, it's hard to be empathetic. It really is hard to be empathetic because the first thing you think, I'm not reliving this again. No, been there, done that, got the T-shirt, not doing it again.
yes.
But then at some point, is there that slight chance of we're misjudging because we think, because we're triggered, that is actually what's happening? That's, so we're reserving the empathy because we're triggered, and because it's a trigger, it's what we feel, it's our abuse, and then now we might be withholding love, affection, attention just because we're triggered and thinking, that's where the boundaries come in. When do we know that person is genuinely actually doing what's triggering us? That's a hard question.
That's when you need to just slow down and do exactly
Right.
what Candace was talking about, which is consciousness. And that's
Right.
when you breathe. This has happened to me a lot, actually, Lacrosse, exactly what you're describing, especially the second cult I was in. I hesitated for a long time to say anything because I wondered if I was projecting. They call that projecting. When you're pulling from your old situation and projecting it onto the now. Okay. And so narcissists do that too, but so do codependent people. Everybody does it. Almost everybody does it. It's actually a natural reaction for the brain to do that. Candace probably relies on it regularly, being blind. She has to kind of, I remember kind of what that shirt looked like, right? And hope that's actually the shirt she's holding. And so, stuff like that, and then there's bigger situations where you're like, is this just like my ex? And I think that's what you have to do, Lacrosse, is you have to ask the question, is there enough evidence to support my belief?
Right.
And really try to take a fair look at it. And you might want to check in with other people in in the situation that you trust, that can see what you see, that can understand and be empathetic to you, your friends, people that you really trust. You could say, did that just did you notice that person? We had a whole conversation and they never shared anything about themselves, or was it me? Right? You can be like, or am I projecting? I've done that several times, lots of times. And at the second call, I was like, did y'all wait a minute? Did that guy just, he just came in here. Did you witness that? And some people made excuses for him, which is also validation that what you're thinking is true. Because codependent behavior makes excuses for the abuser. So if you get a lot of that, you can be sure that you're probably in a group that's toxic. If you get somebody that says, they definitely did that, I can't believe they did that, wow, okay, then you can know that you're probably also right on track. And you might also get people that are like, wow, I can't believe they did that. It's really out of their character. Maybe you should go talk to them. I've had that even in the second cult, and I did go talk to him and he gaslit me. So
It's bottom line is that the whole walk of life and is just the conscious walk. It's just constantly being in awareness. Like when it boils down to it, everything is about being aware, and I don't know.
That's right. So
I'm a little mind blown right now.
that leads us to the topic. The last little topic I want to touch before we go into my tarot reading is, how can you harvest it? What are some tools to help you harvest empathy? What can you do? And I think consciousness is it. Consciousness is one of the ways. I try to meditate every day. So I clear my mind. I do 100 breaths every day, or most days. There are days that I skip, okay? I'm not perfect, y'all. But I do try to go through each bead. There's 130 beads. So I give myself 30 beads of thinking of other things. And the other 100 breaths, I try to just not think of anything and just be clear and focus on my in, out, in, out. And that's all. I try not to think about anything else. And that actually awakens your natural consciousness. So Candace, what are some tools? Do you have some tools for awakening your empathy?
The first thing that comes to mind, like if you're looking to harvest empathy for an individual or for yourself, imagining yourself or that individual, or if you have a picture of them or yourself as a baby, and hold that image in your heart, or get the visceral feeling of holding a stuffed animal, or do a meditation. If it's you, imagine you holding baby you. Empathy is like, it's very
We lost her for a second. I wonder if she was the one having the storm.
Yeah, it wasn't me.
It wasn't you? So then it's got to be her. I'm having a storm too, but it wasn't that loud. We lost you, Candace. You're frozen, and we can't hear you anymore, which sucks because I think we were just getting to good meaty stuff.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully her phone will unfreeze, or she'll realize something is wrong. So tools. Do you have any tools, Lacrosse, that help you be a little bit more empathetic to somebody, or to keep the boundary?
I think one of the tools that I do use is mirroring. Like I'll kind of like mirror or soundboard, or put my, like, before I start to know anything, I'll be like, if that were me, how would I handle this, or what would I do, or whatever. So I do a lot of mirroring. When it comes to boundaries, it is the guard. I do guard up, only because I'm protecting myself. Not, I'd hate to think I'm a narcissist, but I do that because I'm a fear. I don't want to be hurt again. But then little by little, just get to know the person, see that they're a human being. I think bottom line is just seeing that they're a human being. That's what I do. Okay, that's a human being. If they are acting this way, what happened? Always the question, what happened? Like I always used to think about that with my mother. I'd be like, why does she do this? And then I think, wow, well, okay, this makes sense. That makes sense. Okay, let's put it where it is. And then be able to move further with her, even though I know it's not going to go a step or two. It is going to be what it is. And that's another thing, I think, acceptance. Just acceptance of the situations as they come. And realizing the best thing I can do for them is just accept that's the way they are, or that's the way it is. And I don't have to subject myself to it.
And that's nothing more than a clear boundary.
Yeah.
Saying that you want to that you don't want to subject yourself to it. That's actually just clear boundaries. Yeah. And I think that you're awesome for having good clear boundaries and taking it slow. Because one thing I notice about you, Lacrosse, is that you are a vulnerable person. You will bring your vulnerability forward when it's appropriate. You don't lead with it, and that's okay. I don't think it's necessary to lead with it. But if you're having an intimate conversation with someone one-on-one and the person shares something pretty intimate to them, it's appropriate to share something back.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I've been in relationships that Candace was exactly describing. I even have friendships now that I'm like, yeah, that person stays over there because they are not vulnerable enough.
Yeah, well, we say it's okay to have one person in between us. One more.
That's right.
What were we saying earlier?
Exactly. And you know what Bright Hawk says? I think this is the greatest wisdom. She says, put them in the right orbit. You got to get to know a person enough, and it could take a while, and they could change orbits. Some people are going to be closer to you, and some people are going to be out there on Pluto, okay? You're going to be like, hey.
Yeah, right? How's it going?
Right. And that's okay. Yeah. And I think that that's totally awesome.
Right.
So, okay. So now I want to say thank you, Lacrosse. Thank you, Candace. I know she's disconnected. She probably, I don't know, she had some sort of thunderstorm or something, because I definitely could hear it. But anyway, thank you, Lacrosse. Thank you, Candace, for coming and talk. This is not an easy subject to talk about, in my opinion. Takes some awareness and some consciousness. And I want to thank you, Sandy. Thank you to everyone that showed up. Thank you to Robert from down in Australia. Hey, how's it going down under? And Eve, who shared with us grounding, centering, and shielding so that I can first connect with and be empathetic with myself before connecting with others. Hey, right, Eve? That's important, right? And with boundaries, I need to maintain to reach out to others while maintaining my balance in the interactions. Great job. Yeah, nice job, Eve. And Sandy said, I thoroughly enjoyed the show tonight. I love Candace. She's such an awesome guest. Thank you again for the dream interpretation. And you're totally welcome, Sandy. And I agree. I think Candace is totally awesome. I agree. So as we finish up and we wrap up the show, we always wrap it up with a beautiful tarot reading from this beautiful deck called Love is Love. It's also called the Pride deck. You can find it online. And each one of these cards is by a different LGBTQI artist. And it's a completely collaborative deck, which also directly reflects me and my way of living in the world. We all have our own way of doing that. And so I'm going to pull a reading for us today. And I want to remind you that this reading is for everyone that's listening right here and now, listening to it live. If you're listening later, if you're listening 2 weeks from now, if you've listened this far in the show, I want to assure you that this is for you. And I want to say that you should take what you like, take what resonates for you, and leave the rest, because the other messages are probably just for somebody else. Okay. And so this first message that comes up is from the past. And this is actually a really great non-binary person. If you take a look, they have a beard. Can you see it there? I'm
My
trying to get it.
bifocals aren't working. I'm trying to.
No, it's not
bifocals.
focusing. My camera.
Oh, there it is.
you go.
Okay. Okay, I see it.
They have a beard. They have a beautiful, it almost looks like they could be in a drag show, with a beautiful bird on their shoulder, which usually represents messages in tarot. And also they're very comforted by the little stuffed animal bear or whatever it is, or dog that they have attached to them. And look at this, they're actually in the water on a stone, balanced. This is the Queen of Cups. And see how the octopus is balancing the two cups, which I think is awesome. And their treasures are right at their feet, right? Because this card is actually celebrating all the parts of us, the messages that we get. Listen to the messages we've gotten today. Listen to the messages you've heard over the last week or so. Just pay attention to that. I just want to say that. And also notice of your ability, the queen within you. All of us have a queen within us. And this Queen of Cups in particular, she's balancing in the water. She's balancing her emotions. She's balancing even the bird on her finger, on their finger, and the octopus is balancing the cups, right? The cups of tea. And I think that's what this is all about, is about balancing emotions. Be aware of your ability to control your emotions. Did you know your emotions are just emotions? You don't always have to listen to them. In fact, you can choose. It's a choice to react to your emotions. And that's what this is all about, that you can choose to hold your emotions at a different level for you. You can choose the way you react. You can choose how you handle something. Okay? That's what emotions are all about. Emotions actually usually only last a few seconds unless we make it worse. So just so you know, if you're feeling upset and you're crying, just give yourself, let it go ahead and cry for 5 or 7 seconds. Just let it flow. And then the next thing you know, it'll just kind of move on if you let it. Okay? So just want to let you know, emotions only last less than a minute. This next one is about the now. And this is the Knight of Pentacles. So he's all about the gifts of not only money and things like that and material things, but he's also about gifts that you have, the gifts that you offer others, the guardianship that you give. And I think this is a beautiful card because, as you can see, this is actually a seahorse, right? This is a person riding a seahorse. There are actually pentacles down there on the jellyfish. And a pentacle is usually seen as also, and the star on the starfish there is also seen as a form of protection. But if you take a look at that shield a little closer, oh yeah, it's non-binary. Just noticing, it's a non-binary person on that seahorse. Of course, the seahorse is a creature that changes gender roles in nature, a proof that non-binary people exist, in case you needed it. And so this is also proof that you yourself are capable of protecting yourself, drawing your own boundaries. It's a gift. That's what this is. This is a gift. Take the gifts that you have and use them because you have them. I assure you, you have gifts. We all have gifts. We all have strengths. We all have the ability to protect ourselves and to even draw boundaries and draw lines where we need to, because we're all gifted in some way. And that's what's going on here. This card is to remind you of your gifts, the gifts that you give the world and the gifts that you give yourself, especially your guardianship of things and each other even. Like I said, if you get good at boundaries or you recognize that your friend might be crossing a boundary with you, just say something. Try to help them It's, not that you need to take it on, but reminding them, a gentle reminder could be really appreciated. Okay? Especially if the person's having a hard time figuring out what to say because their boundary's been crossed, right? So that's what this card is all about. This card is about what can we do to help each other. It's also about empathy, right? Because I'll tell you, a male seahorses are so empathetic. I've held them in my hand. I assure you, they are the most empathetic creatures I've ever engaged with. They have an interesting intuition, and this character being on this seahorse is very empathetic. They're very able to help another person be seen or help another person feel validated. So remember the power that you hold within yourself, your gift that you have, even if it is just saying, man, when your friend comes to you and says, I had a really shitty day, you can just be like, man, I'm so sorry. That sucks. I had a shitty day last week, man. I feel for you, right? And I hope your day gets better, right? Validate them and give them a little support and maybe some hope for later. That's what this is all about. You hold the power to help somebody else. Empathy is a power and a gift. And this is our future. And you can see this character is kind of on stage. It's Four of Pentacles. Four of Pentacles is very much about harvesting our gifts again. It's also about the way we give the gifts to the world. And interestingly enough, many people that perform are actually being very empathetic in the moment. They're choosing an archetype and they're bringing that archetype forward so that in order to accentuate it and usually harvest empathy from the audience. That's what's happening. And this is a reminder that performers and people, when you watch performers drag or any other type of, especially live art, live performers, be aware of what it might be like for them. That's an empathetic response. And I really think that Spirit's calling me to talk about that. When a person is on stage, to respect what they're doing as an art form, even if it's not really perfect, even if they're out of key or whatever's going on, especially as we start to experience more live performances, right? So just be aware of that and give your gift. Give your gift to the world. So that means if you're a performer, don't forget to get on stage and be empathetic and harvest the empathy of your audience. And so all three cards are really about empathy. Balance your emotions, know where your boundaries are, be aware of them, because that's the best thing you can do for yourself and others, is to know where your boundaries are and speak them as gently as you can so that the other person can understand where you're coming from. Offer your gifts to the world in an empathetic way. Remember, your gifts are important, especially your empathy. And remember that you have gifts to offer the world also, and people that are performing, they're offering a gift to the world. And remember, that's their gift. Even if they do kind of mess it up a little bit. None of us are perfect. And so I just want to say that and try to be empathetic to them. And if you can't be, maybe just step out, go to the bathroom.
Go have a cigarette break.
right. That's what I do. I just step out. Anyway, my friends, I hope you enjoyed that reading. I hope you enjoyed today's show. Thank you, Bright Hawk and Sandy, for the reading, for honoring my reading. And thank you, Lacrosse. I think you did a great job on the dream interpretation today. Thank you. Thank you, Candace, from Frolicking, from Temple of Frolic. I'll be on her show next Friday, the 30th. So please tune into her show and you can come find out what the divine androgen is all about. So anyway, good night.
See you guys.
Thank you for watching Rainbow Soul, part of the WLFE DB Network, a queer perspective on spirituality beyond religion. We appreciate you sharing the show on your timeline, follow us on social media of your choice, and join our Facebook group, Rainbow Soul. We want to hear from you. Share your topic ideas for Hollis and Lacrosse. Explore upcoming shows and interesting guests. The Rainbow Soul Facebook group, where we build community of questioning seekers. Rainbow Soul, where spirituality is our medicine.
Tune in to Kaleidoscope Eyes with your host, Transman Lacrosse Ortiz. Every week, we will be touching topics within the LGBTQIA+ community. We will also be having interviews with individuals within the community and allies. Journey with us as we share in their struggles and triumphs every Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern.